Stuttering start, but they're ending the season with momentum. Manchester City, Continental Cup winners 2022.
Hello and welcome back to the start of a brand new season with MCW Fancast. I'm Emma, thanks for listening. The Women's Super League returns this weekend after last weekend's games were suspended as football paused for a period of mourning for Her Majesty the Queen. Ahead of the start of the season, we are pleased to welcome back to the podcast Dan Pentland from the FAWSL Full-Time Magazine for our season preview, and we'll be answering some of your questions as well. So let's get stuck straight in.
I'm Lauren Hemp and you're listening to MCW Fancast.
Dan, thank you so much for joining me for this season preview. Great to welcome you back on the podcast. How's your summer been?
Busy, very, very busy. Euros. Doesn't feel like the players, it doesn't feel like we've had a rest. So yeah, I'd be happy to have a holiday at some point, to be honest. But yeah, back again.
I'd tell you to get one in, but I think you're going to be running out of time.
Yeah, it's hectic. Really hectic.
Coverage of the Euros, absolutely fantastic throughout. Dream end to the campaign as well. Was it everything you'd hope it would be and more?
Well, England won, so that's a starter. England definitely won. They brought it home. But yeah, I think the standard of football in particular across the board was really, really good. I don't think we saw a lot of what you would class as kind of crazy mistakes or, farcical games. I don't think there was one. Even some of the lesser nations in the tournament played really well, really nice football. So, obviously the crowds came, and not just England. If you went to the games, you saw obviously the Dutch, Swedish, everywhere you went, there was fans of every nation supporting the team, which was really, really good. So, it was just a festival of football overall and a huge success. And obviously the cherry on the top was England winning. But yeah, what a fantastic experience for England and, all of our fans, really.
Heading into the tournament, Dan, obviously, with the coverage that you provided, did you believe that England could have gone all the way, and did it play out the way that you thought it might?
I did fancy them. I fancied them because of the coach. Obviously, we've got a world-class coach, possibly the best coach in the world. So, when she gets to two major finals on the spin, you've always got a chance of her getting to the third one. She had a plan. She stuck with it throughout regardless, and it worked. Did it go the way that I thought it would? I think my concern was that Spain game, or whoever we would reach in the quarterfinals, was something that had concerned me. And I think obviously it was we did need Tooney to come up with a goal late on to save us in that one. But yeah, I think the group panned out as you'd maybe expect. Obviously, Norway were a lot weaker than we thought they were going to be. Quarterfinal was tough. Semi-final, I think we just smashed Sweden at the end of the day. I think, it wasn't, Sweden weren't great, but I think we were just excellent on the day. And then the final at Wembley, I think we've sent out a message, not just to football, but to all sports, whether it be rugby, cricket, tennis, whatever, that, England should be proud of the sports people. And, it gives everybody kind of a big kind of boot to say, come on, we want successful English sports people and athletes, really. So, yeah, I don't think it's just about the men going to Qatar in November. I think it's about, English or British sport as a whole.
How do you see, obviously, the summer now translating, looking ahead now to the start of the season and getting fans through the turnstiles and filling the seats and filling stadiums?
I think the early signs are positive. I don't think it's every club. I think every club have probably got a surge, but some surges in ticket sales and that sort of thing are higher at some clubs than others. So, obviously you want growth across the league. So it's maybe a bit of a challenge at trying to grow it at some of the clubs where it's maybe not quite as popular. So, there's work to be done in that sense. I've been first couple of rounds of the championship and the crowd's pretty decent. But again, there's a lot of trial and error. I think For example, I think I went to Durham and Sunderland, and it was a derby game, and they marketed it really, really well and sold, over 1,500 tickets, I think. But then I went to the Stadium of Light the week after, where they kind of trialled a double header with the men's, and everybody went home after the men's game, and it was a bit of a disaster. So I think some things will work, some things won't work. I think it's important that we try different things. I don't think necessarily selling it directly to the men's supporters is going to work. I just think we need to work out how we get people who have maybe got a general interest in women's football to kind of come out and actually watch the games in the stadiums. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting season, this one.
It's been a bit of from a City perspective. I mean, we're going to look at, clubs on a whole and, what you're expecting from other teams in the league. But obviously for City, we rounded off last season's podcast saying that, regardless of what happened, the City would look a bit of a different team from the start of the season, and that has obviously come to fruition. We've lost, 4 players, key players that had offered a lot of longevity to the squad, and obviously things are looking different. But then, we have had a good summer. We have brought in lots of, seasoned international credible players, which, is something to look forward to and is quite exciting. But how do you look at and summarise the summer that, Gareth Taylor has had, and those players that we've lost and the players that we've brought in?
Yeah, I think let's split it in half. I mean, the departures, obviously, the club have lost a lot of British players. The club have notoriously brought in a lot of British players to develop, particularly, really young players from other clubs in the Super League. It hurts when a player leaves, regardless of if it's City or, anywhere. It hurts to me when we lose a big player to another league, because you kind of think, well, what are England not offering? And for a long time, that was America. And I kind of feel that some of the American players, or the players playing in America, are a bit more kind of intrigued by the English technical game now. And maybe that threat's gone away. But it feels like, there's an awful lot of competition in Europe, and, particularly from Spain, as we've seen. And yeah, it's not great losing players to Spain. Don't know the circumstances behind it. It might be player driven. It could be something else. There might be lessons to learn from it. The league and clubs are having to deal with different challenges all the time. What was a challenge last year might be a completely different one this year. So, yeah, it's disappointing to lose some of our best players, particularly English players as well, to overseas, because I'd really like them to develop and shine over here and make our league even better. So, yeah, that's disappointing. On the other side of it, I mean, the players City have brought in, it opens a new door for me, probably financially as well, because they brought in a lot of overseas talent, and, it's going to sell the club, more to the Spanish league. I think you've got a South American, which opens up a brand new market potentially in terms of, generating interest from, Venezuela and, over in South America. I think you've got, obviously, Yui Hasegawa's just come to the club again. Japanese, that's going to open up doors possibly in Asia in terms of revenue, maybe. I go back to it, but it's probably similar how the early stages of the Premier League were, or, if you go back to around late 90s, early 2000s, when there was an influx of foreign stars into the league, and, it kind of really kicked off, I think, both on and off the pitch. It feels like there might be a little bit of that at City this season, and, we're seeing it around the league too, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I think you've signed some good players. I think you filled some holes. Midfield's still a concern for me. Losing Kira Walsh and Caroline Weir, there's two big pairs of boots to fill there. And, whether there's enough quality in there is another question. But yeah, the players he's brought in, the different, it goes against maybe the previous kind of strategy, if you like. And, City have got players now, representing countries across the continent, and that can surely only be a good thing for the league, as long as the next generation of young English players get their opportunities as well.
City have always been keen to kind of develop that sort of youth in terms of like coming through the academy, taking on young players, like Hemp, and developing those players. And I think that's something City do well, and I think it's a formula that I think still will kind of translate through this squad. And looking ahead to the future and establishing those players as, hopefully a new set of core players, if you like. But the formula in terms of, obviously, as you kind of alluded to, in terms of English players, and this squad has now got a bit of a more international feel to it. We've had our international players, absolutely, but just sort of growth in terms of the players that have come in representing different countries is so different. And how do you see that obviously translating through in terms of like the way City play? And do you think that's going to have some sort of impact in terms of those sort of players coming into the league for the first time, adjusting to that environment, adjusting to that culture? Where we've seen some, Bunny, speak previously about sort of like really struggling to settle in at the beginning. Do you think that's going to become a bit of an issue, or do you think that these players are seasoned, professional enough to be able to adapt from the off?
It's going to be interesting. I think what's the first thing I'd say is that the Spanish players don't speak very good English, so they're going to have to learn that. But they've come in numbers. You've got 3 players there. I think 2 are Spanish, and the other one's come from the Spanish league. So, these players will know each other quite well, and if they're struggling, they've got each other to lean on. Yeah. Likewise with Mary Fowler, young kid from Australia, long way from home, but again, she's got a lot of Australian national team players either at the club or around the league who she can lean on as well. Kirsten Kasperaj is obviously Dutch, and they're kind of already adapted. I think it's almost in the bones. I think that they're kind of adapted to the English game. So I think she's already said how much she loves it in Manchester as well. So I think some players might take a little bit of time to bed in. Style of football might be a little bit different. I don't think the forward line's probably going to change an awful lot, but maybe you might see a few differences in defence, or certainly in midfield. It feels very different in terms of the players who'll be lining up in there. But it'll be interesting to see, because as I say, it feels like a change in direction. There might be some initial pain with that, the fact that City have lost so many British players and replaced them with completely different players. But it'd be interesting to see how it kind of pans out across the season. And the one thing I'd say is it hasn't done Chelsea any harm, has it, from what they've done with their multinational squad probably over the last 5 or 6 years.
Do you think that we've almost looked at sort of like the likes of Chelsea, the likes of Arsenal, and obviously seen that it works for them? Is it something that maybe we need to, is it sort of like, do you see it as a bit of a fresh approach maybe, in terms of thinking, we've done it this way for so long, maybe we need to try something else?
I think it's a bit of a merry-go-round, I think, because we know that Chelsea, and I don't want to offend any City fans here, but we know that Chelsea are currently the most successful club in the league. They're probably the biggest kind of brand in terms of a club internationally in the league because of all the different players they've got. Sam Kerr and Pernilla Harder, they've got world-class players from across the continent. Their sell worldwide is probably bigger than anybody else. So that in terms of City and Arsenal and Man United and Spurs and so on, they're probably the team to develop towards. That's probably the next step, that clubs want to get that strength both on and off the field. And for Chelsea, it's probably more of a case that that they're really targeting that top. Well, to win the Champions League and be kind of the major European force is probably the next step on their development. So, I think a lot can be learned from Chelsea. I think they probably are getting quite a lot of kind of financial input, I suppose, from their owners. And sooner or later, if we're talking about self-sufficiency, that's going to have to be pulled away a little bit. But if they're a global brand, sooner or later, if they do it right, they should be self-sufficient, hopefully, whether that's in the next 5 or 10 years. And I'd hope that a lot of clubs follow that model and, get a lot of success. But I think it's going to be an interesting few years, this, for City, because it feels like there's maybe a new era and, maybe a new direction that the club need to take to move forward and get to the level that they want to get, both in England, in Europe, maybe also in the world.
It's really hard, because obviously you come off the back of the summer. It's been quite difficult for some fans. They struggle to come to terms with the fact that we have lost so many important players, and there is a part of you that struggles to deal with that. But then you have to, teams and clubs, not just City, but other teams as well, do go through these transitional phases. And you look at last season, I think, it was relatively disappointing, especially the first half of the season, and obviously similarly, we start the season in the same sort of vein as obviously being knocked out of the Champions League, which is really disappointing, especially when, we worked so hard for that third place finish, to almost throw it away really, so early on. And, that's going to be disappointing, but you don't want to look at that and see that as, a bit of a headache to carry into the start of the season either.
Yeah, I mean, we had that last year, didn't we, with obviously injuries played a part as well, but, going up the Champions League so early was massive kick in the teeth, and, it took City a long time to recover from that, to get players back. Again, it's going to be a difficult season, this one, because players aren't getting rest. You've got, and, obviously City have got less English players this time, but, they've played Olympics, they've played a full Super League season, they might have had, 25, 30 game seasons. They've then got to the international teams for camps pre-Euros. A lot of the players have had long Euro campaigns, and then, fortnight off and they're straight back into training, and there's no end to the cycle because it's the World Cup again next year, isn't it? So, I mean, it's going to be another challenging period, in terms of the treatment room and, on the training ground, because surely players are going to get tired, going to get injured. They're going to have to really manage player load at every club, not just City. But yeah, you obviously don't want that nightmare scenario that you had last year where you've got a lot of players picking up injuries, and, that's a danger, and it's a danger across the league. So, yeah, I think going out the Champions League, it feels very similar to last year in terms of they're out the Champions League, and, it's managing the player welfare again, because I think, if there's obviously bad luck that you could pick up injuries, like, City had a lot of bad luck last year with Esme Morgan injury and, that sort of thing. But yeah, managing the player load is going to be really, really interesting, because, if you pick up injuries and, if you're short in a particular area, then, clubs are gonna kind of get bitten, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke about sort of Esme Morgan there. It's, almost like we're getting a new player in the fact that she's back and she's with the squad. And, obviously she did feature in those sort of Champions League games too. So it's great to see her back and available for selection. And also Chloe Kelly as well, who didn't have a full season. She come back from serious injury. She's shone in the Euros too. And, she's going to probably have an excellent season with City too.
Yeah, I think there's some real bright points for me. I think, as you say, Morgan will come back. She should be relatively fresh, ready to prove an awful lot. Obviously, Steph's coming back as well. We had a summer of recovery, and Chloe, hopefully she'll be well managed, and, she'll be able to slip into the team. It's just a balance. On the other side of it, you look at Lauren Hemp, who's a player who's been used an awful lot, and I thought she had a good Euros, but maybe I don't know whether it's a case that maybe she needs to develop a little bit more in terms of how she stands out in those really big European games, or big club games, or whether she's just had so much football. But they're going to have to be really careful with her. She's a great player, but we don't want her to be burnt out, or she's got to be managed so carefully. So there's some players who will come in who are really fresh, and they will be like new signings. And as I say, my concern is just these players who've played, maybe 4, 5, 6 games at the Euros on the back of a full season going into another one. It's a problem for a lot of clubs, I think. But yeah, I think, in terms of the players coming in, City can be really pleased about those really who are coming in nice and fresh and hopefully ready to prove a point.
And there are a lot of players as well that you forget that we've got, players like Angledal that probably haven't played anywhere near as enough minutes for the quality of player that they are. Essentially, this could be a big season for those types of players as well. Bunny Shaw, she's going to get obviously an opportunity there with obviously Ellen White retiring to step in and actually, those minutes that she was looking for, and become, essentially an important part of the team.
I expect her to be up there this year with Miedemar and Sam Kerr. In terms of top of the goal scoring charts. I mean, she did really well last year, but, she's playing week in, week out this year. And, again, she hasn't had a Euros, so hopefully she'll be quite fresh. But, yeah, I'd expect her to be right up there, topping the goal charts really. She's a great player. She's obviously physical as well. She's a great kind of out and out number 9. A great replacement for Ellen White. You could have argued she should have had more minutes last year. You look at the players either side of her, and they're on the day they're world class as well. So there's absolutely kind of no concerns about the forward line. I don't think. I think Bunny should be a really great player, but again, it's just making sure that the management's right, so that if she's the top player, that City can hang on to her, and hopefully, if she has a great season, the club are in a position that if they get an outstanding bid for her, that hopefully they're able to fend it off, and she commits the future at the club for the long term.
Okay, so forward line looks good. Back line looks all right. What about the midfield, Dan?
Obviously, losing Carolyn Weir and Kira Walsh is, well, I mean, can you lose 2 bigger players, really? Obviously, we don't know the reasons behind it. I'm not even going to speculate on that. So I think, as you say, there's opportunity now, because there's players who can probably slot into that midfield who haven't had minutes previously, and go out there and make a name for yourself. They're at the club for a reason. They're on the payroll for a reason. So, it's time to pull your socks up and dig deep, really. I think Hasegawa's an excellent addition. I think she's an underrated player in the league. Really, really tidy feet. She's quick. There's not much of her, but every inch of her is absolute class, really. So, I think it was a clever signing when you lose Kira Walsh with 24 hours of the transfer window to go. If you're going to sign somebody, it's got to be somebody of real quality if you can. And yeah, I think Gareth's got pretty much the best that he could have. And it sounds from what Yui's saying that she wants to play a part, across the midfield, really, both deep and in attack. So it'd be interesting to see what she offers. But I was impressed with her at West Ham. Obviously, she scored against City last season. But yeah, I just think she's a quality player. And I mean, I don't get on YouTube really and watch some of the clips, because in pre-season she's been on absolute fire with some of the goals she's scored. Really, really good goals. The opposition's questionable, but she's got real talent, I think, and with the right leadership and coaching, I think she could be one of the top midfielders in the league.
Obviously, everyone's talking about Kira Walsh at the moment, so obviously we can't not mention it on the podcast. Kira, it's just so hard to talk about, because Kira has been so loyal, and she's an unbelievable player, and she's always been one of those players that has been well respected. And Nick Cushion obviously has always spoke so highly of her. Fans speak so highly of her. A lot of opposition fans are now speaking obviously highly of her because of the impact and her contributions in the Euro as well. She's getting a bit more of that recognition that she is so deserving of, in my opinion. I've always said, she's one of those players that just plays beyond her years, and she's an incredible player to watch. If you're not kind of in the stadium watching her live, I don't necessarily feel that you get a real feel for it, Kira Walsh, and what she actually brings to a game, and how controlled she is in terms of her ability when she's on the ball, and how she pulls the strings, and she just opens up the game for you. She is a big loss, and she will be a big loss for City, but she's got an unbelievable future ahead of herself. A player like that, you only wish her the very, very best, because she's so deserving of it. And you couldn't literally ask for anything more from a player like Kira Walsh, who's pretty much given everything to the club. But how much of a miss do you think she'll be to obviously City next season?
Yeah, I mean, she's a huge loss. You can't, we can say whatever we want, but losing Carolyn Weir was a big loss. Losing Lucy Bronze was a big loss, but when you lose Kira Walsh, that's probably the most painful one. That's not being critical of anybody, but it is a huge loss. I don't think anybody wanted Kira Walsh to go. As you say, it goes with everybody's wishes. It's a great opportunity. She's going to play for a club who got to the Champions League final last year. They won the Champions League the year before. So, it's not as if she's swapping City for a club where she might struggle to win anything. From joining Barcelona, I don't want to say guarantee success, but you're going to be challenging for trophies all the time, and big ones at that. So it's a huge loss. I just want to see, and it's not just City. This I just want to see the league grow and the clubs in the league grow so that they've got more defence of this situation. As I said about Chelsea being kind of a multinational, kind of this big global brand now, and they're just growing and growing and growing. If Chelsea got a bid for a Sam Kerr or somebody like that, they might be in a position to bat that away. But if Arsenal got a bid for a big player, I mean, they've impressed us this year, Arsenal, because they've retained a lot of their players. So it shows that, in terms of what they're building there, they're on the right track. Maybe they need to be a bit more aggressive in the transfer market in terms of the financial side of it. But again, they're maybe moving forward, and for City and United and Spurs, I just want them to grow, into the point that if they're getting bids for players, whether it be a top player or whether it be a player that they really want to retain, that they're in a position to be able to retain them on, good contracts, and be able to say no to offers, and offer the player something to stay in terms of what the league's providing. And I don't think it's anything negative on City or any of the other clubs. I think it's just that the league's got to grow. And I think we launched this full-time league in 2018. We've had COVID, we've had we're now in an economic crisis, and when you're trying to sell a full-time product and get the investment in, clubs are going to need time to get that on board. And if we're looking to make clubs, self-sufficient in the long term, then the money's got to filter in from somewhere. And we've only had a Barclays deal, obviously, for a year now. So, over time, I'd like to see the top 4 or 5 clubs in the league be kind of financially solid and, be able to be more aggressive than defensive sometimes in the transfer market. But at the minute, it feels like we've maybe only got 1.5 clubs in that situation. I don't think, it possibly feels tough at City at the minute, but I don't think it's just City. I think, again, I think Manchester United might have problems in the future if they're trying to keep hold of the top stars, Spurs and so on and so on. So, I think it just needs time. I think City fans it's very tough. I think you've just got to stick in there and, give it 2 or 3 years and just see if the club are in a better position in terms of how they deal in the transfer market over time. But I think it's just time. I think, management and that sort of thing, you can't really go into that. I think it's just time and this full-time product and where we wanted all of our clubs to be in terms of growth. I mean, again, you said about crowds this season, and we've had seasons without any money through the turnstiles. So, yeah, see what the future holds. It's tough now, but I'd like to see the top half of our league structure be really, really strong, in terms of what we're dealing with in the future.
There has to come a point as well, though, where we do start to have the conversations about when are we going to see that expansion of the WSL and the Championship. When is it going to come? Because it almost feels like we are leading up to it. We're getting there, but in order for it to truly go, I think that's something that we need to see happen as well. And we've spoke about it before, but when do you feel that really realistically those next steps might come?
I think in terms of the expansion of the leagues, it feels like we're pretty much ready now, to be honest. There's aggression in that second tier. There's aggression. There's clubs wanting to openly invest in the teams and build Super League teams. So, in terms of developing the league from 12 clubs to 14 and making it a bigger competition and bigger games, I think that can happen. I think it's a huge mistake this year, and I don't know if there's going to be any change to it, but I think it's a huge mistake having 1 up, 1 down from the Championship, as we saw last year. How can you win the Northern League and the Southern League and only one of those teams get promoted? So, yeah, I think there's work to do on the structure, but it kind of feels like we're ready. We should be taking it in our stride now to grow the league. And, that again, that's only going to surely attract the interest, both in terms of fans through the turnstiles and, that financial interest as well. It feels like it does need to grow. Not hugely, but, a couple more clubs in either league, I don't think will go amiss.
Let's just look at the oppositions then this season, Dan. I mean, obviously we spoke at length at City and how our summer's been, but how do you summarise everybody else's windows, and do you feel have made the best moves this summer?
Yeah, it's been an interesting one because, some clubs have been really active. Obviously, City have, we've said about City. Chelsea have obviously had a bit of an exodus of long-standing players at the club in the summer, but I think they've signed real quality as well coming back in, which is a sign of their strength. Arsenal have been a bit quiet, so it'll be interesting to see how they compare against, two kind of new look teams, if you like, in Chelsea and City this year. Obviously, Man U have signed a lot of players, so it'll be interesting to see what Mac does there with those. And then, you've got a few kind of wild cards. I think Villa have signed some really good players.
Yeah.
When you bring Rachel Daly in, when I thought she was so impressive going into that Euro campaign, they obviously mean business. I think Carla's done quite well there. Kirsty Hansen's gone there today as well. Not had a lot of minutes for Man United, but I think she scored goals when she's played as well. So, I think Villa might be a standout. Spurs again, and you got one or two wild cards in there. Brighton have had quite a large turnover of players. So how's that going to go? You've got the new manager situation at West Ham, and they've signed some experience, but then they've also signed a lot of young players as well. So they're going to rise to the challenge, or are they going to struggle in the league? And it's going to be interesting. I think there's been a lot of change, a lot of investment, and some clubs will obviously achieve a lot, and some might underachieve. So it'd be interesting. But I don't think I see a change to the top three this season. I think that's one thing I'd say. I just don't think there's another club which is there yet.
Yeah, I mean, you've spoke about Villa there. I'm excited to see what they can bring this season. I think that, like you said, you've brought in some really strong additions to the squad, and I definitely feel that they'll be a little bit more progressive, I think, as a team this season. But what do you think about Leicester? Because I'm kind of on the fringes with Leicester at the moment. I'm not too sure. Do you feel they've done enough?
In terms of recruitment, no, I don't. There's one club for me, and sorry, any Leicester fans or any Leicester players or even the Leicester manager if she's listening. But
I don't think
I'll just caveat that one. But there's one club which for me sticks out like a sore thumb at the bottom of the league in terms of they struggled last year. How much of the strength in this year? And it's Leicester. I think they brought one or two experienced players in, which was important. But you're kind of looking at it, they've just come up and, you're going to sign maybe 7 players, 8 players, and I think they've ended up with 3 or 4. So, they're the obvious ones to stick out to say, well, hang on a minute, they look a lot weaker than everybody else. Granted, there's one or two teams above who've lost a lot of players and there's been a lot of turnover and there's, by no means is it going to work for them. But the only thing I'd say in defence of Leicester is the coach. I think the coach shines so brightly when you speak to her that she's in complete control of and belief of what she's doing there. I think, I was speaking to her last week and she said about, how they're looking to be more physical, and she took them on all these kind of, physical kind of training camps over the summer, but she was really kind of sure of the job that she was doing there and the ability that she had at the club. Comes across as kind of such an intelligent, highly rated kind of young coach that, maybe she's the difference. Obviously, she came in and turned things around last year. They are a very, very interesting bunch at Leicester because on paper, you can't not fancy them to struggle because of the players they've signed and maybe the lack of depth they've maybe got. But in terms of the coach, you've got her and you've got Paul Konchesky, who's come from the men's game, for example, going into West Ham, and he's an untried and tested option. Maybe her coaching know-how, she's been on the England setup as well. Maybe that'll be the difference. But she comes across as really, really, clued up, and England youth coaches or England coaches have generally done very well in the Super League. So maybe there's something there, and maybe we're being a little bit harsh on Leicester.
I just feel like they're one club that kind of, like, the ethos and everything about the club and how it's communicated and how they go about things is really positive. I just kind of expected a little bit more from them, I suppose, to kind of see that sort of, I don't know, like just sort of kind of moving forward a little bit. I suppose I kind of thought with everything that they've kind of been saying in recent sort of months and stuff, I just thought that it would just translate a little bit more and come across a bit more in terms of their summer. I thought it might just be a little bit more positive in terms of showing their intent, I suppose.
Yeah, I think, as I say, the signings, if you're down there and, let's be honest, they played Birmingham away last season, and I think the Birmingham goalkeeper, Emily Ramsey, at the time got sent off and it was rescinded, and Birmingham lost the game. But I think if they'd have won that game, there's a chance that they wouldn't have gone down and Leicester would have returned back to the second tier. So, yeah, there's a question if they were that close to relegation. And let's be fair, that Birmingham weren't a great side last year. Obviously, Darren Carter did a good job when he came in, but at times there was a gulf between them and the rest of the league. So, if Leicester was so close to that, just by kind of common sense, you'd look at that and you'd think, well, surely there'd be quite a change around in players. But their biggest signing, I would hope, would be the manager signing on permanently, because, as I say, she just shines through. When you speak to somebody, sometimes it just makes an impression, and you just feel that she's got a lot more to give to the Super League, and she could well bring out a lot more out of those players than what Leicester maybe thought they had initially. So it'll be a fascinating watch there, because they are going to sink or swim, but nobody really expects them to swim that well, I don't think. So, yeah, fascinating one.
I was looking through my notes from when we did this season preview last season, and we spoke a lot about Everton. Now, Everton, we expected Everton to be one of the probably surprise packages of that season, and it didn't actually prevail in that way. And actually, it was Tottenham who had the better start. And again, another team I feel that have had a good summer and gone out and sort of got those players that you kind of feel that would bolster Tottenham in terms of probably goals, really, which I think is all that they really lacked last season in terms of helping them get the results that they needed, really. And it very much seems that they've gone out with the same sort of intent and addressed those sort of key areas. Do you think that Tottenham again are going to be one of those sort of teams that could potentially take points off of big sides?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think we saw Brighton have a really good season. I think their highest ever finish the previous season. They were. I don't think, did they finish sixth? I don't think they're as high as Spurs, but obviously last year replicating that at times they maybe struggled a little bit. I think they finished slightly lower, but it was hard to replicate it 2 seasons on the spin. With Spurs, I think Rian's gone for experience there. Virtually every player they've signed is a player who's really kind of established in the league, and you kind of know what you're going to get. They've got forwards this year, got a couple of forwards in. So, yeah, you're quite right there that maybe they will get more goals. I don't know, with Spurs, I just feel like they've got their identity. Like, they know what they want. They know how they want to get there. Not every club's got that. They're unique. They know exactly what they want to do. They want to be kind of that physical team, the team who are difficult to break down, clinical at the other end of the pitch, can be aggressive when they want to be aggressive. They're an interesting team to watch in the league. They're not always the best on the eye, but they're just very, very good at what they do. So if they keep their image and, they keep the playing style, then, I think there's every chance that they could replicate what they did. But I think pushing on, fourth, third is going to be tough. It's always going to be tough. But again, they're another club who look like they've got the support of the men's team as well.
And I suppose we need to talk about United. Another, Matt Skinner, he's gone out and, he's brought some more experienced players in. Obviously, Keats probably didn't have a great, if you look at it on reflection, she's not had a great season at Arsenal. She's been brought in, obviously, to bolster the forward line of United and get some goals. Do you think this is a good opportunity for Nikita to cement herself within a squad and get sort of regular playing time and, become a key part of United going forward?
I think this is a key season for Nikita Paris, to be honest. I think it really, really is, because we know she had a tough time at Arsenal and she's not necessarily had an easy time with England. I thought against Austria, actually, when she came off the bench, I thought that was the best game she's had in an England shirt for as long as I can remember. I thought that was Nikita Paris back to her best. She then obviously started the other night. She got a goal, but was I overly impressed by her performance? Probably not, to be honest. I think, you're playing Luxembourg and, I just expected a bit more. I think finding what's best for Nikita as well is really important, because, I think she kind of played out wide the other night, but, I thought she was more aggressive and more deadly from playing a little bit kind of more central against Austria. So, you sometimes think of her as a wide player, but, would she be better just with that kind of, with the skill and the pace, just running straight at the centre backs? And, so I think Mark's got a job on. I think he's got to get the best out of Nikita, and he's got to get Nikita happy and confident in what she's doing. If he does that, he's obviously got himself a top England player, hopefully. He's signed a mix. Everything else he's got is, there's some players who are kind of pros in the Super League. He's brought some players in from overseas. I think Maya Leticia will be a very good signing for them, a player who's obviously going to blossom at the back. Lucia Garcia is another one who, I know United fans are excited about. And I think they wanted depth this year. That's the message which is coming out of United. They wanted depth. So, some of the players maybe that he's brought in might be more squad players. I don't think United fans were too, I wouldn't say unhappy, but, they were maybe intrigued by Adriana Leon. But, she's had a good international break and, she was carrying an injury for a long period. So now she's fit, we might see the best of her at United. So it'll be interesting to see what United do, because, we would like to see them be more competitive for third spot than last year. Obviously, City fans don't want me to say that, but
I was going to say, look, the reality is that they're pushing, and they were in and around those top three spaces last season, and they believe that they can build on that, and rightly so. If you're that team, you're going to believe and you're going to want to see your team in and around the same positions again, and if not doing better. So we have to up our game to ensure that we don't allow that to happen. Regardless if it's United, Tottenham, whoever, teams are getting better. You're starting to see, the investment coming through, and teams getting stronger, and it's only going to get better. If we're going to progress, that's what we'll continue to see. So it's to be expected that teams like United, teams like Tottenham, Reading, they're going to compete, and that makes for a more competitive league, which I think we can all say last season was probably one of the best seasons we've had in terms of bringing that competitiveness, and what's going to happen, and the excitement around games was much better last season.
Yeah, I mean it's a ladder effect as well. I suppose every club wants to be aiming for the next step on the ladder, and if you're not aiming for that, there's 2 or 3 championship clubs breathing down your neck, wanting to get in the league and not wanting to look back. So from a City's perspective, you'll want to be pushing on for more trophies, for second position, challenging top spot. United are no different. If they haven't got European qualification yet, what would it mean for that club to be playing in Europe next season for the first time? It would mean absolutely everything. For some of the lesser clubs to get into the top half, that would be a real sign of progress. So, everybody's aiming for that. And I thought last year the league was really, really good. But it just feels like, again, this year, everybody's invested in it. And everybody brings something a little bit different to the league. So, it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a really, really good season. As you say, there's so many clubs where, particularly in the bottom half, you don't really know how they're going to do. There's probably a couple of spaces in the top half if teams perform really, really well. So it'll be interesting to see just which teams step up. But there's a requirement for everybody. I don't think you can stand still in this league anymore. I think that the quality is just getting better all the time.
Yeah, I just remember that last day of the season, being in the Majesty, and And then the rumblings started going around that United were winning against Chelsea last day of the season, and potentially if United win that game, it's a totally different end to the season that you wouldn't have predicted. I know for me to sit here as a City fan and say that it's probably ridiculous, but as a neutral fan, it keeps people more engaged as to what's going on. I'm just glad to see those sort of games and those sort of changes in terms of like the progression and in teams and stuff. I think it's exciting. I think we should be welcoming that progression as well, because you don't want Chelsea romping the league every season. You want to see somebody pushing them. If it's City, if it's Arsenal, it's been the last three or four seasons now where Chelsea have continued to dominate. And I don't want to be finishing third place this season. I want to be pushing hard. I don't want to be starting next season wondering if we're going to qualify the Champions League before we've even started. We need to get top two. If we can't obviously win it, and I believe that we can do it regardless of what's happened across the summer. I believe in the players, and I believe that we can get the results. We're quality side, we've got quality players, but realistically, for City, where should City be setting their sights this season?
I mean, first and foremost, second, I think, look, Chelsea are there to be shot at. So first of all, I'd love to see City and Arsenal take Chelsea on. Are either club there at the minute? I mean, let's be fair. I mean, when Chelsea lost the likes of G in the summer and players like that, then they were in the middle of a takeover saga, you were thinking, well, hang on a minute, what kind of Chelsea we're going to see next season?
That's exactly what I did. Yes, that is.
And I'm sure in the nicest possible way, every City fan had the fingers crossed that something that might not quite go right, that the club would come through it, but maybe they wouldn't go and sign 2 or 3 absolute steaming world-class players over the summer, but obviously that's happened. So they're there to be shot at. But for City, it's got to be progression, hasn't it? It's got to be, you've got to see that the club are heading in the right direction. So, if you can beat Arsenal that second spot, maybe flirt with Chelsea up there and put some pressure on and see what happens, then, that's a good season. Obviously, it's important that the club are winning trophies as well. So, the 2 domestic cups are important, I think, as a sign that you're still heading in the right direction. But yeah, I mean, from a kind of neutral point of view, I'd love to see a 3-way title race where it's really, really exciting. But you just want to see steps forward, and that depth, you want to see some squad depth shining through. If you lose 2 or 3 players to injury, hopefully no more, but you'd like to think that if you take a player out, you've got a player of equal quality to come in. And obviously last season it was really difficult with the injuries, but there wasn't necessarily always that like for like kind of replacement. So it does feel like they've got more depth this year. There are question marks in midfield, whether there's the depth in that area, but you just want to see that you can utilise your squad and push on and have a more successful campaign than last year.
Yeah, definitely. We've had a few fan questions, so I'm all right to put those to you. And
I'm looking forward to these.
Get through them between us. A lot of obviously questions are surrounding the new players that we've brought in over the summer. Janet would like to know, just want to focus on the future now. I think as City fans, I think that's just what we need, where we need to channel our energies at the moment. We have potentially a great squad. Who do you think will stand out amongst the new signings? Janet's saying she's looking forward to seeing Mary Fowler and Dana. She thinks they'll have a really big impact on the squad once they've settled in. Who are you looking forward to seeing, Dan?
I'd like to look at most of them in the Champions League, to be fair. I think Dana really good. She's showing that. Mary Fowler's only young, she might need a little bit of time to settle in. I think we maybe haven't seen the best of her yet. Harby, I thought, was good in the Champions League. As I say, it's a good job we did this podcast today, because I think Hasegawa, I absolutely love her. I think she's going to be great. The footwork is going to get fans off the seats, and she's not Kira Walsh. That's the first thing to say. She's not Kira Walsh, and you can't compare it to Kira Walsh. But she'll bring something, I think, to the team that City fans haven't seen before, and that's quite exciting, I think. So, yeah, thankfully City signed her today, and yeah, I think she's going to be good.
I've got to be honest. I was kind of worried heading into it. I kept saying to you, Dan, we need to put it off. We need to put it off. I think we're going to make a signing, so we just need to hold off, because I wanted to go in sort of like hoping that, obviously, with the announcement of Kira Walsh, that we sort of had a bit of a comeback, a bit of some good news, obviously, to follow. Obviously following the announcement, and it has come, and I do believe that it is a really good signing, and especially when you sort of get towards sort of like the final day, deadline day, and you're thinking, oh, what are we going to do? Can we get something over the line? And I think we've delivered, basically, which is always really pleasing, that we've managed to have, the pull here in terms of getting, a quality player in, who, like you said, is tactically gifted, and got absolute a mind-blowing skill set, from what I've seen her do on the ball. So, a player like that within your squad, like you said, it makes kind of like the football entertaining as well, because you kind of like looking for those sort of moments where you're just like, wow. And she's one of those sort of players that can sort of wow fans too.
Yeah, as I say, she's global. That's what I like about it. She's a player who's come off the continent, who's very different. She's probably the only player of her type in the league. But it's moving towards that global product. Again, how many different countries is the Super League available to watching? It just adds another kind of string to City's bow, something a little different from a different part of the world. But yeah, she is. There's not much of her, but you'll love every inch of her.
Shahan sent a message in, and I actually replied to him on Twitter because I thought it was absolutely brutal and awful. Probably more for me than for you, but he wants to know how I reacted when Caroline Weir scored against City in the Champions League. Well, funnily enough, I actually couldn't watch the game, and I was gutted because it's the first time I've never been able to watch a game. And basically, I was when the game was being played, I was at Wembley watching Coldplay. And they were actually live on stage whilst I was trying to follow the game, and I had my phone in my hand, and I'm obviously watching a concert, and it was absolutely incredible. And then I had a notification that obviously Real Madrid had scored, and I was like, oh, I'll be honest, I did swear. I wasn't very happy about it. But then when I saw the notification come through that it was Caroline Weir, I was livid. I just thought, out of all the people, it just had to be Caroline Weir. And when you just have one of them feelings heading into the game that if you're going to lose the game, you don't want it to be Caroline Weir. And I think everybody probably had the same sort of sentiment heading into it. And obviously to see it be Caroline, and then to get back to the hotel and kind of see the goal and see the celebration, it was just a little bit heartbreaking. But yeah, it's done now, and I'm just going to put it to the back of my mind, and I hope the players, the club, and everybody else does the same. For me, I am gutted though, because I do see it as a wasted opportunity at this point. You can't do nothing about it. It's just we've got to use it as fuel to do better and finish better in the league, and so we don't put ourselves in this position again next season.
It was just always going to happen. That's how I leave it. It was always going to happen. It always felt like it was going to happen. It felt like it was meant to be, but you were hoping it wasn't meant to be. And yeah, I'm not a City fan, so I'll leave it into your side of it.
The worst thing is, I think I tweeted, and I actually said, if we have this game done and dusted in 50, because I think it kicked off at 8:00. Coldplay came on at 8:15, and I think I made the mistake of saying, if City could have this game done and dusted in the first 15 minutes, that would be great. And then on 15 minutes, Caroline Weir scored, and I'm just thinking, what? But yeah, it was all right. But then I had Coldplay, so I kind of think it was the best way to kind of to not think about it in that respect. I think Dave sent one through, and it is a good point, but I suppose it's one of those points that you could probably just talk about for ages. So What are Dan's thoughts on the fan structure of the WSL? Does he think that away fans should have designated away sections, and should they be available to purchase through the club for each specific game? Obviously, this is a bit of a talking point at the moment, given the rise in sort of attendances and ticket sales. So hopefully, having away fans given accessibility to designated away ends.
I read this question the other day, actually, and yeah, it got me thinking. But yeah, I mean, there's some games where you know that there's going to be a big away following. So I don't know, you've got your Manchester derby, or one of the Manchester clubs at Everton, for example, or a Manchester City Chelsea game, whether it be home or away. There's games where you could certainly allocate the away club an amount of tickets. I don't think that would be doing anybody any harm or causing anybody any additional trouble by doing that. Even if you did it, that there was, I don't know, 100, 200 pre-purchase tickets. I think in the Football League, you sometimes get a discount, a couple of quid off, or, there's some kind of incentive for kind of buying them before you get to the turnstiles. So, there's definitely there's an argument for it. I suppose the other end of the spectrum, you could ask a question, I don't know, if West Ham were going to Man City on a Sunday night or whatever, where they're not going to bring a lot of fans, would you then allocate them a segment in the stadium? Would you give them tickets to sell in advance? Is there any benefit of doing that through West Ham? If they're only going to sell 10 tickets or something like that, maybe less so. But I don't know if even if you had five rows of, in that scenario, 5 rows of 10 seats, and you give them 50 tickets to sell, and they didn't sell them all, and you just put the rest back to the ticket office or whatever, would there be any harm to do that? You've got everybody sat together, and even if it is only a small group. So yeah, I think it's something we need to look at. It's definitely something we need to look at. Obviously, the big games, you could allocate a space of 1,000 tickets or whatever. Spurs away in their huge stadium that they're not going to fill for a Super League game. You could easily give City, for example, or United the away segment of the stadium, that they would for a Premier League club, and just sell it block by block or row by row and see where you get. So yeah, I think we need to look at it. We certainly, in terms of the top maybe 4, 5, 6 clubs, we maybe need to look at it. Some of the long distance games, and as I say, you could even offer small allocations. You don't have to give every club 1,000 tickets or whatever. You could, give them 50 tickets as kind of the minimum cap or something like that. So yeah, I think the important thing is fans want to sit with each other. If Man City Supporters Club want to go away, you obviously want to sit or stand together and go as a group. So yeah, it needs looking at. I don't think there's any harm at all in doing it. And you could always trial it with games involving the top, what you would see is maybe the top 4 or 6 clubs, and then maybe roll it out from there.
I think one of the biggest bugbears of it all is that a lot of the times when you are purchasing these tickets, obviously you have to go directly through the opposition's club, and to do so you have to register an account, and then you end up getting all emails and and stuff you're not interested in.
Yeah.
So I mean I can understand both sides of obviously the logistics of it and the fan side of it, but as the game does continue to grow, which it will, it's one of those sort of things that there needs to be some sort of consultation on.
I mean, there has been discussions, because we had this last year. There has been discussions about, if you turn up to X ground, do you know there's a game on? Is there a sign there saying that the team, I don't know, Aston Villa at the Bank Stadium, or, Man United playing at Lee, maybe not in the traditional kind of venue, if you like. If you've got somebody going past, who maybe likes women's football but doesn't follow it religiously, might not actually know there's going to be a game on the following day or whenever. So that's been mentioned about making games visible, making tickets accessible has been mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see whether clubs find solutions to it. It feels like it's complicated, and all that kind of stuff. It's been mentioned. So, when we do, a year, 2 years on, something needs to be happening. I think it needs to be easier. I mean, I looked on a club's website this week for a big up and coming game, and it was nowhere near sold out. I couldn't buy a ticket. Why could I not buy a ticket? If the stadium's empty, why on earth could I not log on and see an available ticket? The ticketing system wasn't sufficient for, an elite professional game of football or a professional sporting event. So, we can't keep going on about these issues. Something's got to happen with it. Yeah. It'll drive fans away if you can't get a ticket, and you live in, I don't know, the London area, for example, where you've got X amount of games going on, whether it be men's or women's. You're just going to go to another game if you can't get a ticket. It's just driving fans away. So, yeah, I completely agree that things need to be simplified. Things need to be put in kind of the fans' club's own hands, so to speak. And it's just got to be easier, and it's got to be more visible as well for some clubs. Obviously, some clubs are better at it than others.
I think that's about it. I think we've kind of covered everything as best we can. Obviously, the season does get underway shortly. And we're looking forward to it. I can't wait to be back in the stadiums and getting behind the team again. It almost feels as though the summer has just come and gone, like ridiculously fast. But we'll hopefully catch up again soon, Dan. But before you go, obviously, FA Full-Time Magazine. Do you want us to tell us about the next edition and where fans can pick theirs up?
Yeah, we've got subscriptions on sale at the minute. We are digital this year just with cost of living and all that. It's just not, we don't think fans can afford to pay for it. And equally, it's difficult for us to produce at the minute in terms of costs of production. So, yeah, if you go onto our Twitter feed at FAWSL you'll find details on there or drop us an email. But yeah, we'll still be producing, but it'll just be in that kind of digital format, which hopefully we should get out quicker as well at the start of each month. So there are some benefits to it.
Brilliant. So if fans haven't got a subscription, where can they get theirs, and what are your socials so fans can get in touch?
Yeah, so just the easiest way really, drop us an email, FAWSLfulltime@gmail.com, and I'll sort you out.
Brilliant, Dan. Well, enjoy the start of the season. And as I say, hopefully we can catch up again later in the season and see where we're up to. That's how I'm going to put it.
Yeah, let's see what happens. But yeah, thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, all the best. I'll see you soon. City will now begin their season campaign away to Aston Villa on Sunday at Villa Park. The game will be available to watch live on BBC Two and BBC iPlayer. Kickoff is 12:30pm. And that's it for this week's episode. Thanks to Dan for joining me. We'll be back next week, and this time we'll be getting the thoughts of the fans. Have a great week, everyone, and if you are travelling down to the game on Sunday, have a safe journey and enjoy the game.